As lovable as Brian is, he's had his fair share of, well, let's just say mishaps. From getting drunk and making poor life choices to becoming the laughing stock of the Griffin household. Brian's been through it all. Here are 10 of the worst things to ever happen to Brian Griffin. In the episode, The D in Apartment 23, we witness disaster in Brian's already tumultuous life as he gets down into the world of Twitter. Well, what's a better way to express your opinions than through a platform notorious for turning mild grievances into international incidents? And yes, it doesn't end well.
Hey, if you don't want to get fired, don't become a teacher, right?
Totally, you should tweet that. Hashtag fire everyone.
I guess I could fire up my account again. Type in tweet, blast off in 3, 2, 1, and tweeted. I am back in the game. See?
After a brief flirtation with activism, Brian starts tweeting like he's the next great philosopher. His tweets initially gather less attention than a cat video on a Monday morning, but then, in a moment that could only be described as epic fail, he makes a racially insensitive remark about a film before seeing Baywatch. Genius move, Brian. It's almost as if he thought, what's the worst that could happen? Oh, well, let me count the ways.
Better get a tweet out before I go dark for a few hours. About to see the new Kevin Hart movie. Just kidding, I'm white and went to college. Hashtag Baywatch movie.
As fate would have it, Brian's tweet goes viral while he's in the theater. Talk about timing. Imagine sitting there, popcorn in hand, when suddenly you realize you've become the poster child for everything that's wrong with social media. The moment he exits the theater, he's greeted by an angry mob that looks like they just stepped out of a horror movie, complete with pitchforks and torches. Welcome to cancel culture, Brian. You've officially hit rock bottom.
Hey, are you at Dog Backwards from Twitter?
I am. Are you a fan?
You racist jerk! I hope you get foot and mouth disease!
Brian faces lots of attacks after this. In true Griffin fashion, Brian tries to delete the tweet and apologize, but it's like trying to put toothpaste back in the tube. Messy and utterly futile.
What were you thinking writing that tweet?
What? It was just a joke. All right, I'll delete the tweet.
You haven't deleted it yet?
Lois tells him he needs to move out for the safety of the family. The best way to say I love you is by kicking your pet dog out onto the streets because of his bad jokes.
We think you should move out.
What?
Oh! Brian, listen, we love you, but they're throwing things at our house. We've got to keep our family safe. I'm sorry. It's for the best. I'm sorry, Brian, but this is the way it has to be.
So, Brian packs his bags and moves into a rundown apartment that looks like it hasn't seen sunlight since the last ice age. For a second, I lost a tear for him. Now living solo, Brian quickly learns that being an outcast isn't all it's cracked up to be. He struggles to cope without the Griffins. Oh, Twitter. Such a happy life he's got there, yeah? Brian Griffin has had his fair shares of misadventures, but nothing quite compares to the chaos of Seahorse Seashell Party. While a hurricane is raging, instead of preparing for the storm, Brian decides to indulge in some questionable substances. Magic mushrooms, to be exact. Because what's a better way to cope with impending doom than by tripping out?
Our top story tonight, we continue to track the progress of Hurricane Flozell. The National Weather Service has issued a severe hurricane advisory and is urging everyone to stay indoors for at least the next 36 hours.
As the storm howls outside, Brian embarks on a psychedelic journey that leads him to cut off his own ear. Yes, you heard that right.
These are mushrooms. It's a psychedelic drug. Makes you see weird things and feel happy for a few hours. I figure we're gonna be stuck inside for a while with a storm, so it'll be a fun way to pass the time.
I'm gonna cut my ear off to prevent World War II.
In his hallucinogenic haze, he thinks it's a good idea to perform surgery on himself. Obviously, self-mutilation is the answer to all of life's problems. Stewie, ever the loyal friend, or perhaps just a morbidly curious observer, sticks around to patch him up while Brian experiences nightmarish visions of his family as monstrous beings. Talk about a family reunion gone wrong.
What the hell are you trying to do, man? Those mushrooms are messing you up.
Meanwhile, Meg reaches her breaking point after enduring relentless jabs from her family. In a moment of clarity amidst the madness, she confronts them about their years of bullying. Naturally, this leads to a classic Griffin family meltdown where everyone turns on each other like it's a twisted game of who can be the biggest jerk. Peter runs off crying. Lois is left devastated. And Chris is just confused. Typical. Brian's escapades highlight his questionable life choices. From being a pretentious writer to now a mushroom-chomping mess. He's like that friend who always takes things too far at parties.
I think I'm dying.
His attempts to calm his nerves backfire spectacularly, proving that sometimes it's better to just ride out the storm with a cup of tea rather than hallucinating about your family turning into monsters. In the end, as Brian sobers up and reflects on his bizarre night, one can't help but wonder, is this rock bottom for him? Or just another pit stop on his journey through life's absurdities? Either way, it's clear that Brian Griffin has mastered the art of making bad decisions in the most hilariously tragic way possible. Just when you think Brian has gotten over his previous downfalls, he becomes a police dog, a role that hilariously amplifies his already questionable moral compass. After a bout of self-reflection prompted by his therapist's advice, Brian decides to join the police force as a drug-sniffing canine. Yeah, his contribution to a better society.
I'm in a rut. Nothing thrills me anymore. I can't even think of a reason to get off the bed in the morning. Trapped in my own life.
Why don't you do some volunteer work?
Oh, that makes sense. Volunteer work. Thanks, Bruce.
First, Brian becomes a guide dog, then a police officer.
Here, right this way. Watch your step.
As Brian dons his police badge, he quickly learns that sniffing out drugs is less glamorous than it sounds. Instead of solving crimes, he finds himself indulging in the very substances he's supposed to detect. This leads to a series of absurd escapades, where his newfound powers get him into more trouble than he could ever imagine.
You guys, Brian's famous! You're a hero!
Way to go, pal. Nice work, rookie.
You're a credit to the force.
Additional generic cop compliment, Brian.
Well, I better take this cocaine down to evidence.
Oh, hey, I'll do that. I'll catch up with you guys at the pub.
Brian's nose, which is supposed to be his greatest asset, becomes a liability. He gets high on cocaine, showcasing the classic Family Guy humor that often borders on the absurd.
Whoa, Brian, there's no smoking in the terminal. Griffin, there's no easy way to say this. I think you have a drug problem.
Brian loses his badge to excessive cocaine, and he has to go to rehab to get better.
Give me your badge.
Look, you guys got it all wrong.
Oh, I'm so sorry, everyone. Oh, God, I need help.
Good luck, Brian. I just know you're gonna get clean.
You know what? I think my therapy here is complete. I came here to get clean, and I did. So goodbye.
His escapades include accidentally sniffing out drugs during a police bust, which turns into a chaotic scent reminiscent of a slapstick comedy. The irony? The dog who's supposed to uphold the law is now violating it left and right. His hypocrisy shines through as he preaches about morality while simultaneously engaging in reckless behavior. It's almost as if the writers thought, how can we make Brian even more despicable? And then decided to give him a badge. By the end of the episode, he realizes that being a police dog isn't just about sniffing out drugs, it's also about dealing with the consequences of his actions. As he stumbles through his new role, it's clear that no matter how high he climbs, or sniffs, he remains the same morally ambiguous dog we all know and love, or loathe. In this episode titled Brian, Portrait of a Dog, we find Quahog sweltering under an unusual heatwave, which is a fancy way of saying the Griffins are sweating like pigs in a sauna. They are also without air conditioning, because why would a family with a talking dog invest in modern comforts?
Ugh, it is so hot out there.
Peter then has a brilliant idea. He tells Brian to get into a dog show for a chance to win $500. Everyone tries to convince him to get into the show because they need the money for a new air conditioner at home. Oh wow. Of course, nothing says family bonding like exploiting your pet for cash.
Hey, check this out, you guys. The Rhode Island Dog Show Championship is in Quahog this year. First prize is $500.
Well, if you won, we could use that money for a new air conditioner. Hey, Brian, you could win for sure.
Come on, Brian. We really need a new air conditioner.
Brian, naturally, is less than thrilled about this plan. He's not just any dog, he's Brian Griffin, the literary genius with a flair for martinis and existential crises. But Peter, with all the subtlety of a sledgehammer, convinces him to participate.
Sorry, I don't do dog shows. It's not my thing.
After all, what's more dignified than performing tricks for a bunch of strangers while wearing a ridiculous bow tie? The irony is delicious. Ryan's life is already a circus, but now he's the main act. At the dog show, things take a turn for the worst when Peter decides to put a bone biscuit on Brian's nose. This moment is peak humiliation. Again, Brian's not just any dog. He's supposed to be the sophisticated voice of reason. Instead, he's reduced to good boy status, and he is furious. I refuse to perpetrate the stereotype of the good dog, he barks indignantly. Honestly, who can blame him? If I had to balance a biscuit on my nose for a bunch of cheering humans, I'd probably consider running away too.
Welcome to the Quahog Dog Show. Today's competition will be almost as hot as the weather, which is once again in the triple digits.
What the hell is this?
Oh, well, this is the part where you beg for a treat. Me and the little shred of dignity I have left will be waiting in the car.
On their way home, tensions boil over as Peter and Brian engage in a classic Griffin-style argument. Brian storms out of the car like he's auditioning for the amazing race, except instead of racing for glory, he's racing toward his own personal disaster. And wouldn't you know it,
Peter, if you cared about me, you'd never ask me to do something so degrading.
Stop the car.
the police show up to ticket him for violating the local leash law. Yeah, this screams bad dog as he's getting pulled over by Officer Doofy.
Is there a problem, officer?
Can I see your license, boy? I'm gonna have to ask you to lie down on the sidewalk.
He is brought home and fined for his acts. Then again, Brian is mistreated again by Peter and he leaves home.
The fine is $10.
In true Griffin fashion, Peter decides that since Brian has left, he might as well replace him with a cat. Oh well, this new kitten turns out to be more violent than an action movie star on caffeine. The family quickly realizes that they'd rather have their beloved canine philosopher back than deal with Mr. Scratchy Claus.
Oh, stop it. We all miss him. Go find him, apologize, and bring him home.
Meanwhile, Brian is living his best life as a homeless dog. If your idea of best life involves being kicked out of public places and drinking from water fountains like an unlicensed hobo,
Sorry, Pooch, you gotta sleep outside. No dogs allowed in the bus station.
he gets so low that he viciously attacks a man who dares to treat him like an ordinary mutt. Well, an expression of I'm still classy, resorting to violence over your dignity.
You want me to be a crazy animal? Okay, I'm a crazy animal.
Things take an even darker turn when Brian finds himself sentenced to death by lethal injection at the pound. Talk about overkill.
Oh, he's cute. Aren't you precious? Lethal injection. Next. Help me.
But wait, Peter swoops in like an underdog hero and convinces the court to let Brian plead his case. Seconds into this trial, it becomes painfully clear that no one takes a dog seriously in court. Shocking revelation there.
Brian, great news. The city council agreed to hear your case.
You're kidding. If I prepare my case, I might have a chance after all.
Wait a minute. Why are we listening to a dog? Take him away.
Just when it seems all hope is lost, Peter delivers an emotional appeal that would make even the toughest judge weep, and then bribes everyone with $20 each, because apparently justice is for sale in Quahog. Miraculously, they drop all charges against Brian.
Sometimes we all need a second chance. Sometimes we all need to forgive. I'll give you each $20. Deal, he can go.
By the end of this chaotic episode, Brian earns newfound respect from the townsfolk who previously treated him like yesterday's chew toy. Also, he can finally drink from the same water fountain as everyone else. What an achievement. The Griffins return home with their beloved dog, and Stewie even bows slightly in respect. It's almost touching, until you remember this is Family Guy, where touching moments quickly turn into absurdity. Brian's tragedies remain unending. This time, he finds himself in a marriage that's about as fulfilling as a soggy dog biscuit. Brian's union with Jess starts off with promise, but quickly devolves into a sitcom of errors, thanks largely to Peter's genius advice. Because really, who wouldn't take life tips from a man whose idea of a balanced diet is a beer in each hand?
Jess is going to live. Stewie, I've got to get out of this. I can't take it, Peter. I thought I could marry Jess, but it's awful. I can't live this way.
Peter's attempts to help Brian are classic. He drags Brian to a bar exclusively for husbands, where they can commiserate over their marital woes. It's like a support group for those who've given up on life and love. Indeed, Peter's activities provide some much-needed comic relief amidst Brian's existential crisis. At Peter's suggestion, Brian decides to embrace the let-it-all-hang-out philosophy. He starts gaining weight at an alarming rate, transforming from suave literary dog to a canine version of Peter, complete with all the same charmingly disastrous life choices.
Well, yeah, Brian. Every man's true weight is at least 20 pounds heavier than how they look.
As he waddles through life, Brian's self-pity reaches new heights. He even injures himself trying to get through his newfound girth. Sweet way of saying, I'm living my best life. Hip dysplasia.
I'm sorry to say you have hip dysplasia. Well, wouldn't hurt to lose some weight. And he won't be able to walk until his hip heals. You'll need someone to take care of him.
Things take a darkly comedic turn when Brian, in his state of despair, becomes convinced that faking his own death is the only way to escape from his miserable marriage.
I don't have bed bugs. I'm burning it down so I can fake my own death.
When Jess takes him for what he thinks is hip surgery, it turns out she's considering euthanasia instead. The sheer absurdity of the situation has viewers questioning whether they're watching Family Guy or a tragic soap opera.
This isn't a doctor's office. This is the pound. You're being euthanized. What? Jess is having me put down? Says right here, I gotta euthanize Brian Griffin, and you're him.
Meanwhile, Stewie and Chris are involved in their own side story that feels like it was tacked on during a coffee break. Stewie develops an addiction to vaping after attending one of Chris's wild parties. If there's one thing we needed more of in this show, it's a toddler with a nicotine habit. Their displays are amusing, but ultimately feel like filler compared to Brian's spiraling disaster. As the episode barreled towards its conclusion, Peter rushes in to save Brian from the clutches of euthanasia after Jess reveals her intentions. Just when you think things can't get worse for Brian, they do, because that's the Family Guy way.
When is Brian coming back?
Oh, never. I'm having him euthanized.
In the end, Brian and Jess manage to survive their near-death experience together, but not without leaving us wondering how many more disasters this poor dog can endure. We also find out about Jess's death, because why not add another layer of tragedy to Brian's already pitiful existence?
Well, Brian, I'm sorry that Jess died during the commercial break, but it was a very nice funeral service.
Yeah, it's sad.
Brian Griffin continues to be the poster dog for bad decisions and even worse relationships, proving once again that sometimes love really does hurt, especially when you're married to someone who's considering putting you down. In the episode, Brian Wallows and Peter Swallows, we see Brian struggling to find an intelligent woman to love. Oh well, if you're looking for love in Quahog, you might want to lower your standards, like, way down.
So, tell me about yourself, Tina.
Brian, your standards are ridiculously high. You'll never find a girl unless you're willing to make exceptions and compromise so you can find your love.
After drowning his sorrows in a delightful cocktail of regret and whiskey, Brian finds himself behind the wheel, taking drunk driving to a whole new level of poor decision-making. This leads to his community service sentence.
Whoa, you're off the meter, Brian. You're under arrest. On the charge of driving under the influence, this court finds you guilty. In lieu of jail time, I sentence you to 100 hours of community service.
He's assigned to the Outreach to the Elderly program. Enter Pearl Burton, a mean-tempered elderly shut-in who could give a grizzly bear a run for its money in the crankiness department.
So, what do you have to do for your community service?
I got assigned to the Outreach to the Elderly program. I gotta take care of some old woman who hasn't been out of her house in 30 years.
For weeks, Brian endures Pearl's verbal barrage with the patience of a saint, or perhaps just sheer stupidity. But even the most tolerant souls have their breaking points. After absorbing her abuse like a sponge in a hurricane, he finally snaps and unleashes his own storm of sarcasm and insults upon her. It's like watching two toddlers argue over who gets the last cookie. Both sides are equally ridiculous.
Brian, you've been awfully quiet. Is the community service not going that well?
Oh, Lois, it's horrible. I was cleaning her house all day. It's the worst job I've ever had.
That's it! I have had it with you, you old hag!
That night, while trying to drown his shame in television, Brian stumbles upon a Mysteries and Scandals episode featuring none other than Pearl. Surprise, right? Yeah, you know it.
We now return to E's Mysteries and Scandals. Pearl Burton, the Jingle Queen.
She wasn't always an elderly curmudgeon. Once upon a time, she was a successful jingle singer with catchy tunes that stick in your head like gum on your shoe. In her prime during the 1940s and 1950s, she had the voice of an angel, but flopped at Carnegie Hall when the audience demanded their favorite jingles instead of her serious music.
Yet from 1945 to 1960, you couldn't turn on a radio or television without hearing one of her trademark jingles.
Realizing that his new friend isn't just an old bag of bones with a bad attitude, but rather a former star who vanished from public life after her disgraceful debut, Brian's heart grows 3 sizes that day, much like the Grinch. But with more existential dread, he rushes back to Pearl's house just in time to stop her from hanging herself.
Yeah, and that voice, I had no idea.
Pearl!
Oh, stop
trying to talk me out of it. I'm a pathetic sellout.
No one who sings Carmen like you is pathetic.
As Brian convinces Pearl to overcome her agoraphobia through an extravagant musical number, because why not turn life-threatening situations into Broadway productions? She finally musters enough courage to step outside, but lo and behold, the universe has other plans. She strides proudly into the street only to be promptly struck by a truck.
Brian, I've missed so much. I wouldn't be standing here right now if it wasn't for you.
At the hospital, Pearl reassures Brian not to blame himself. After all, it was the best day of her life.
God, I never should have made you leave the house. This is all my fault.
Shh. Don't be so hard on yourself. Aside from the truck part, this was the best day of my life.
In a bizarre twist of fate that only Family Guy could conjure up, they share a virtual reality experience where they marry and have children before Pearl quietly passes away, as if she were just waiting for the right moment to exit the stage.
Goodbye, Pearl.
In Season 7, Episode 12, titled 420, Brian Griffin's life takes a nosedive, so hard that it might as well have been piloted by Peter. It all begins when Quagmire adopts a cat named James. Naturally, Peter and the gang are so emotionally mature about it that they decide to prank Quagmire by shaving the cat. But because Peter's hands are about as steady as his IQ, he accidentally kills James. Bravo, Peter. You've officially made cat grooming a felony.
Well, what is it? What's a big damn deal?
Look.
It's a cat.
Yeah, I just got him today. His name's James. Isn't he just the cutest thing you've ever seen?
You know what we should do? We should go over there and shave it.
That's a great idea. Let's do it. Let's shave the cat. Oh, my God.
Peter, you killed it.
Panicked, Peter and Brian try to dispose of the evidence. What screams innocence like two grown adults sneaking around with a dead cat in their trunk? They're pulled over by the police, who take one look at the situation and decide, dead cat? No biggie. But wait, pot? Now that's a crime.
Pot! Smell him out of pot! You're under arrest, dirtbag! Oh, come on!
I don't appreciate drug addicts in my town. I'm a family guy.
Brian gets arrested for possession, and the family shows up to bail him out.
All right, Brian, your family's here to bail you out.
I can't believe they threw me in jail for a quarter ounce of pot.
Well, Brian, it's your own fault. I mean, pot is illegal for a reason.
Lois, don't be a hypocrite. You've smoked pot.
Brian isn't let off the hook completely as he is placed on probation. Still, Brian doesn't exactly learn from his lesson. When Joe shows up for a urine sample, Brian, ever the genius, tries to pass off Stewie's urine as his own. Maybe if there's one thing probation officers love, it's baby pee.
Brian, under your probation, you're required to submit to random drug tests. I need some urine.
Stewie, I need your urine.
Lois catches him mid-scheme and gives him the classic, "I'm not mad at you, I'm disappointed" speech. Inspired by this guilt trip, and probably still high, Brian decides to start a campaign to legalize marijuana in Quahog. Apparently, when your life is falling apart, why not drag an entire town down with you?
Brian, what the hell? Brian, is this how you're trying to pass your drug test? By stealing a baby's urine?
It's time for Quahog to legalize marijuana.
Brian and Stewie perform a musical number about the joys of pot. The tune is so catchy it makes everyone forget that they have jobs or responsibilities. Soon enough, Mayor West legalizes marijuana, and Quahog transforms into a stoner's paradise. Crime rates drop, and productivity soars. In essence, weed is the secret ingredient to world peace and quality TV.
As mayor of Quahog, I hereby sign into law the legalization of marijuana.
Good evening, everyone. Our top story: marijuana is now legal.
But alas, Lois's father Carter sees his timber business going up in smoke because hemp is now replacing wood for everything. He bribes Peter to create anti-marijuana propaganda videos. Well, if anyone knows how to make an effective media campaign, it's the guy who once got stuck in a grocery cart for 3 hours.
This hemp was poised to replace wood as an inexpensive raw material for the manufacture of paper.
I'm losing money, and it's your dog's fault. Now I have to get hemp illegalized again, and the only way to do that is to start a fear campaign designed to turn people against pot.
Carter also tries to bribe Brian by promising to publish his novel, Faster Than the Speed of Love, complete with an Oprah sticker. Brian reluctantly agrees to sing an anti-pot song. The very perfect way of saying moral integrity is selling out for literary fame.
It's your novel, Brian. Faster Than the Speed of Love. Ready to ship out tomorrow. All you have to do is publicly come out against pot.
Predictably, Brian's novel flops harder than Meg at prom. Critics pan it so badly that even Stewie can't come up with an insult harsh enough.
In other news, a local Quahog author has set a record for the worst-selling novel of all time. Brian Griffin's Faster Than the Speed of Love.
This is so humiliating. I sold out everything I believed in, and I have nothing to show for it. My book's a bomb.
Meanwhile, marijuana becomes illegal again, leaving Brian lamenting of how he sacrificed his principles absolutely nothing. Congratulations, Brian. You're now both a failed author and a failed activist.
Marijuana is hereby re-illegalized.
Can Brian ever get enough of bad things happening to him? In The Old Man and the Big Sea, Brian Griffin finds himself in the middle of a moral crisis that spirals into one of the most chaotic adventures of his life. While visiting Carter Pewterschmidt's pharmaceutical company, Brian discovers a horrifying secret. Carter has been withholding the cure for cancer to maximize profits. Yes, Carter decided that curing cancer wasn't as lucrative as milking humanity's suffering for all it's worth.
I can't stress how important it is our secret be kept from the public. Oh my God! Specimen Z isn't Carter's body. What is it? Specimen Z is a cure for cancer. Carter, you've discovered the holy grail of modern medicine. Why the hell would you keep it buried like this? There's far more money to be made in treating a disease than in curing it. Why cure someone of cancer in a day if we can treat them for a lifetime and bill them every step along the way?
Brian, ever the self-proclaimed moral compass, when it suits him, is outraged and ropes Stewie into a plan to expose this corporate villainy. After all, how else could he say, "I care about humanity," then dragging your toddler friend into a high-stakes heist? The duo embarks on a mission to steal the cure and reveal it to the world. Their escapades included breaking into Pewterschmidt Pharmaceuticals, dodging security, and getting their way through a labyrinth of corporate greed. It's like Ocean's 11, but with more fur and fewer heists. That actually makes sense. They eventually succeed in stealing the cure before rushing back home to share their discovery with Lois. She is horrified by her father's actions. But before they can blow the whistle, Carter shows up with his goons to reclaim his secret. In true Carter fashion, he manages to spin the situation by introducing an absurd new product instead of addressing his monstrous greed. I mean, when you've got a cure for cancer in your back pocket, why not launch an edible deodorant for mentally disabled people instead? Priorities.
Brian here has stolen something very important from me. Give it to me, Brian.
The episode concludes with Carter escaping accountability yet again, leaving Brian grappling with his failure to make a meaningful change.
Lois, your father has a cure for cancer, but he won't release it because it's not profitable. So I stole it. Yeah, so what? So I found the cure for cancer and didn't announce it. Big deal. I also took a dump today and didn't issue a press release.
For once in your life, do the right thing.
All right, Pumpkin. I'll do it. I'll do it for you.
Despite being intelligent and morally outraged, Brian's efforts ultimately amount to nothing, leaving him defeated and powerless in the face of systemic corruption. For a character who often positions himself as morally superior, and, let's be honest, usually fails spectacularly, this failure is both humbling and deeply frustrating, cementing it as one of his lowest points in Family Guy. So much for being the voice of reason. Maybe next time, he should just stick to writing pretentious novels instead of trying to save the world. In this episode, titled The Blind Side, we witness a series of unfortunate events that could only happen in Quahog. And the mastermind behind it all? Brian. It all starts with Stewie, the pint-sized genius picking up a splinter from the old staircase. Lois, in her infinite wisdom, decides to replace it. Because clearly, a splinter is the real crisis here. Forget about Meg being trapped under a roof beam for 2 days. She's not so important after all.
It's 'cause these old stairs are just falling apart.
It's not just the stairs. Meg has spent 2 days pinned under a roof beam.
Let's just focus on the stairs, Brian.
Peter then suddenly becomes a slapstick performer as he struggles to get through the new slick stairs. Watching him fall down repeatedly is like a live-action version of a cartoon. Except this time, there's no anvil involved.
What the hell happened to the stairs? They're all slippery now.
I had them replaced, remember?
He even throws in the towel and moves into the bedroom permanently, declaring war on gravity and common sense. Who knew that Peter would rather live in isolation than risk another tumble? Maybe he should have just invested in some non-slip socks. Meanwhile, Brian, our resident dog with delusions of grandeur, meets a blind woman named Kate at Quagmire's Disabled Ladies' Night. at the Drunken Clam.
Welcome to Disabled Ladies Night.
I'm Kate.
I'm Brian.
Hey, check out Brian with a blind chick.
Brian's excitement is palpable until he learns that Kate hates dogs. Oh joy. Just when you thought his love life couldn't get any worse, it does. But hey, who needs honesty when you can just pretend to be a non-canine loving human? Brian's strategy? To charm Kate by pretending to be the perfect gentleman while conveniently hiding his furry identity. He fakes dates to impress her. I'll say, I'm a great catch. Yeah, lying through your teeth about your identity and interests. Their date at the movies goes smoothly until one of the neighbor's dogs barks, prompting Kate to express her deep-seated hatred for dogs. Brian manages to escape without even a goodnight kiss. Truly a modern-day romance.
Ugh, our stupid neighbor's dog barks 24/7. God, I hate dogs.
The next day, Stewie digs deeper into Brian's disaster of a love life and suggests that Kate might be using him for a seeing eye dog. Brilliant deduction skills there.
Seeing eye dogs are expensive. She may just be trying to get one for free.
No, actually, she doesn't want a seeing eye dog. She hates dogs.
Brian brushes it off, but soon realizes he's in too deep when Kate invites him to dinner with her parents, who can see perfectly fine. Panic.
I'm just going to avoid touching her until a little more time has passed, and by the time I tell her, I'll have impressed her so much that the dog thing won't even matter.
Hey, Brian, would you be cool with meeting my parents? They're in town this weekend, and I thought we could all have dinner.
In a fit of desperation and with Stewie's help, because what could probably go wrong with Stewie involved? Brian wraps himself in bandages and pretends to be recovering from a heroic burn incident. Stewie even dresses as a nurse.
I'm Brian's nurse. He's had a little accident, I'm afraid.
And I'm just sort of bandaged up right now.
When the truth finally comes out, surprise! Kate leaves him faster than Peter can fall down the stairs again.
There's a dog in here.
Yes, okay? There's a dog in here. I'm a dog.
You know what, Brian? I could have gotten over the fact that you're a dog because I really do care about you, and I feel like we had a connection. But I can't get over the fact that you lied to me. You screwed up, Brian, and now you're gonna have to watch me walk out that door.
The episode wraps up with Brian wallowing in self-pity until Stewie convinces him he can just use a different voice to win her back. If there's anything more romantic than deception, it's definitely more deception.
Well, since Kate is blind, you could probably just do a different voice and go out with her all over again.
Who knew that Brian getting through love could be as slippery as Peter's new staircase? After a daring pickup at a car wash, Brian has a steamy affair with Tori, a married woman.
Just a regular wash, please.
I'm Tori. I got hit by a car in high school, so I don't have to work.
But just when he thinks he's hit the jackpot, her husband, Vic, a former Navy SEAL who has the not-so-humble distinction of having killed Osama bin Laden, crashes the party. Yes, bad timing. You thought right.
Wow, that was amazing. Hey, just to be clear,
I don't really think you're a whore. I just need to say that to finish.
Oh, crap. My husband's home early.
wait a minute, you're married? And he's here? Now?
Yeah, that's him. You've got to get out of here. He's really jealous. I think he's bitter because he never got the credit he deserved for killing Osama bin Laden.
Your husband's a Navy SEAL?
Now, Brian suddenly has to don the role of the family pet. Yeah, the family pet. Let's try a mental picture. A dog collar around his neck and a leash in Vic's hand, while Brian tries to get through his new life as an oversized golden retriever. One can only imagine the internal monologue. This is what I get for thinking with my... well, you know.
As long as he thinks you're our new pet, we can keep fooling around behind his back.
Huh, you're right.
As if pretending to be a pet wasn't demeaning enough, things take a turn for the worse when Brian finds himself at the park with Stewie. Here's where it gets juicy. Stewie spots him and can't resist the chance to mock his unfortunate fate. Look at you, Brian, walking on a leash like some sort of furry accessory.
Brian? What are you doing on a leash? And who's that?
Shh, be cool. This is the guy whose wife I'm banging.
Oh, what a romantic way to put it.
Yeah, it's great. I just pretend to be their dog, and then when he leaves for work, I get to go to the pound, if you know what I mean.
What's next? A doggy sweater? It's all fun and games until Brian has to endure listening to Vic and Tori get busy in the bedroom. Nothing like the sweet sounds of marital bliss to ruin your day and your dignity.
Come on, I won't have to watch this.
Desperate to escape this canine charade, Brian attempts to make a break for it. But Vic, ever the suspicious husband, chains him up outside like some kind of guard dog. Such a show of trust. Lock in your wife's lover in the yard. Here's Brian, who once had his pick of women in Quahog, now reduced to barking at squirrels and contemplating his life choices.
I think my wife is cheating on me. I like how you're chained up in a yard and still trying to pretend you're a guy.
When he finally musters up the courage to complain to Tori about his situation, yes, that's what any self-respecting dog would do, she pulls a classic move and leaves him behind as she skips town. Loyalty at its peak, I suppose. Meanwhile, Stewie realizes his buddy is in deep trouble and decides it's time for an intervention. He recruits Chris and none other than Vice President Joe Biden for a rescue mission. When you're in over your head pretending to be a pet, who's better to call than the Vice President?
Well, we figured you'd say no to us, but not to Vice President Joe Biden. Thanks, Mr. Biden.
No problem.
As always, it's just another day in Quahog for our favorite dog, who somehow manages to remain both tragic and hilariously relatable amidst his chaotic existence.